Dr. Curtis, you are on.
Thank you much. Welcome back, everyone. I trust you had a good break and got your late breakfast or fresh cup of coffee. You know, the U.S., it's absolute best when we create public-private partnerships to overcome some daunting challenges. And I think that's what we're seeing with CMMC is this really strong public-private partnership to increase the cybersecurity of the nation and help the world, frankly, with this, or certainly our allies. The Consortium for Information and Software Quality is signing an MOU with the CMMC Center of Excellence, and our contribution is going to be measures that can be used to analyze the products for cybersecurity problems, weaknesses, vulnerabilities that need to be fixed. Half of the attacks that were successful actually exploited some weakness or known vulnerability in the software application that manages private data. So that's one of the things we've taken on as part of our effort is to create a measure of data protection. Joe Jarzombek of Synopsys has led the effort at CISQ to create this measure. He is, and a lot of you who know him from his work at the Department of Homeland Security, where he really did a great job of organizing the cybersecurity community, and he's now a member of CISQ governing board representing Synopsys. So Joe is going to tell us about CISQ's effort to create a subset of our software security measure that really focuses on data protection to add to the cybersecurity capability of organizations. And then I'll come back and talk about some of the new work we're doing on measures for DevOps. Joe, over to you.
Great. Tracy, next slide. It's really I'm glad to be able to present this. This has been something that's been a challenge for us for years. And we know that data protection has played the forefront of this because regardless of process, I mean, regardless of what we talk about cybersecurity, at the end of the day, we care about protecting the data. Yeah, you see so much of the regulatory guidance coming out on privacy as well as protection of confidential but unclassified information. This isn't just playing out in the Department of Defense, it's playing out across industry, across all of our digital society. So as Bill had mentioned earlier, we've already come out with our measures for security, reliability, performance efficiency, and maintainability. All of these are based on CWEs. And for those of you who may not be familiar, CWE is part of ITUT's Cybersecurity Information Exchange, or it's called CIBEX, the 1500 series. In fact, CWE is called out internationally, so ITUT, the United Nations standards body, that's recognized by 109 nations. And CWE is ITUT X.1524. So it's actually internationally recognized already. So we're leveraging that. And then the next, as she revealed, we have a data protection measure. It's based on these CWEs, and it started with security and reliability. We took a lot, there's a close correlation among those, the particular CWEs that are associated with those. And what we're looking at specifically is our CWEs within source code that impact data leakage or data corruption, meaning that they are potential vectors that could enable unauthorized reading or modification of data. I don't care what kind of process controls you have in play. If your software fundamentally leaks data, you're not protecting data. Next slide. And as Bill mentioned, we have been focusing on the software product quality standards in the 25,000 series, and we focused on reliability and security for this. In particular, if you look at the sub-characteristics of security: confidentiality, integrity, non-repudiation, accountability, authenticity, and compliance. We looked at what can you detect within software that actually supports that, or in some, the counterpart is what says that you aren't supporting it. Next slide. And so what we looked at particularly is supporting enterprise and supply chain needs and protecting data, confidential information, or intellectual property, or privacy. And if you're paying attention to all the presentations that preceded this, election security, they say, how do you know that your vote counted? Well, data protection is needed to ensure the process is not compromised through unauthorized reading or modification of voting data. And to be proactive, you've got to be able to identify source vectors that could become CVEs that need to be patched. CWEs represent source vectors that so long as they are resident within the system, new CVEs will be generated. And within the supply chain part of it, we look at it as trying to be proactive to really gain insight about cyber assets regarding a risk exposure attributable to exploitable software that allows data leakage. Meaning, are you actually procuring components that would allow data leakage? Can you do something about it in advance? And so these are all based on the scoring system. What we look at with CWEs, we have the common weakness scoring system. And within that, the base findings, technical impact that enable unauthorized access to read or modify data. And this is going to be submitted as part of our OMG standard process later on this year as we move forward, even in the ISO IEC process. Next slide. So I realize that many people are going to say, oh my gosh, CWEs, what do I do about this? Well, these are actually known by tools and tool vendors that this allows automation so that these represent source vectors for somebody to, without authorization, to read or modify data. You don't actually have to fully understand that, but tools do. The idea is that your developers, your auditors, your testing people don't have to be cybersecurity experts, but they need to be armed with tools that have the domain knowledge under the hood that allows them to check for these things. And I will tell you, there are many static code analyzers out there today. Our company has those, Bill's companies, many of those who are members of CISQ already have tools that look for these. And what we're looking for, there's actually a total list of 89 CWEs, only 36 parent CWEs with 53 contributing weaknesses. And so again, automation enables scaling and early remediation. I'll give you a simple example. Within Synopsys, we have Coverity that has part of that as code site. It's the equivalent of giving a developer a spell checker that literally, as they're coding and they have a coding flaw that allows one of these, it will literally pop up, it'll flag, it'll show you the path where the weakness occurred, and it gives you recommended remediations. The idea is having a spell checker, your developers can fix this right there, rather than just deploying it out and it puts the enterprise at risk. So again, you don't have to fully understand each of these CWEs. Tools and techniques do. And you want to be able to arm yourself with one of those tools that were able to do that. And I will tell you, I'm going to give you the fast forward part of this. For a tool to be compliant with this new data protection measure, they simply have to be assessed against those 36 parent CWEs and be able to detect at least one of the contributing weaknesses that are under there. Many tools already do this. And so as soon as we're publishing this, you're going to see many tool vendors come out and talk about this. So next slide. So the question we have, and this is the poll that Tracy is going to be taking. Are you making it so that people can actually click on this? Do you have any of these? Do you currently use any of these special publications or standards? So you're very familiar with 800-171. You've been hearing all about CMMC. And of course, that's based on the protecting controlled and classified information. NIST 800-53, Rev 5 is currently out on security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations. And then 27001, information security management. Many organizations are already leveraging these. We're curious about which of yours might already be using that. Because many of you might be using all of them, or some of you are just getting started with that or receiving an assessment against that.
It looks like we're almost ready to close the poll.
Okay.
Watching the responses. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll and I'll share the results.
So it's not surprising that the granddaddy of them all 800-53 is used by most. And now with the new interest on CMMC, 800-171 has been out there for quite a while. Many organizations claiming compliance against that. Now, more than ever with CMMC, it's going to be really checking on that. I will tell you, more organizations are stepping up to using 27001 on information security management. And part of that's because their customers are asking for that. You want to go to the next slide? So we know today, you've already heard about CMMC that's used for confidential and classified information. There's also within Europe the General Data Protection Regulation, within the California Consumer Privacy Acts, and of course the other standards and special pubs are out there. Right now, many organizations are doing their own self-assessment. How do we stand against that? More are now starting to step forward with formal audits that go against that so they can actually advertise that and give that to their customers who are requesting that information. These are all process related. I will tell you that scanning code that will run or is running in your enterprise network connected assets that process or transmit data would really determine if the systems or devices enable data leakage or if they lack adequate protections to mitigate unauthorized access to read or modify data. This basically says, I don't care if you put a lock on your screen door, you're still going to have people exfiltrate data if you have weak data that allows that. If so, that such a scan would reveal if data protection or privacy controls associated with the process assessment were actually inadequately implemented. And so using this new automated source code data protection measure would provide independent verification of processes revealing source vectors for data leakage or data corruption, providing indicators of non-compliance with the respective data protection or privacy guidelines, regardless of which regulatory regime you're going to fall under. And you know, as said earlier, it's not about passing the audit, it's about being secure and actually protecting the data that we say that we're protecting. Next slide. And so I realize this is, and the slides will be available to everyone. What we took a look at are those standards that organizations are currently undergoing process assessments. I mentioned NIST 800-171 Rev 2 on the security requirements. And those relate to NIST 800-53 relevant controls that are there. And there's also a corollary with ISO IEC 27001 controls. So there's this mapping that we've provided that you would be able to know this subset of those process assessments. These are security requirements that says these are the ones that are at risk if your software actually is leaking data. You could, you know, just as examples, some of those: limit system access to unauthorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users and devices, including other systems. Or limit systems access to types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute. Again, if your software leaks data or allows unauthorized access, then you're not compliant with these process controls. My intent was not to go through all of those. You can scroll to the next one, but you notice it's under basic security requirements. It got identification, authentication, risk assessment, security assessment, and then finally, we've got the ones on system and communication protection, as well as system and information security. These are process controls, but you still have to look at the system or the assets that are running the enterprise that allow that. So there's a good complement. Like you want to do your process assessment, but a process assessment by itself without understanding the products, the devices, the assets, they're actually running the enterprise, that are processing, transmitting, storing data, then these process controls are at risk of not being properly implemented. So you have to do both. It's a process assessment and product assessment. And as I mentioned earlier, there are many tools that can help you today in the area of static code analysis, simply running those. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, our next
So
poll.
ask the question. It's the poll.
All right. while we give this a moment, I just shared in the chat box the list of CWEs that we've proposed in the new data protection privacy measure. I'm also going to share a copy of Joe's slides here. Just one moment while the poll is open. I see people asking for it.
If you're in the healthcare area, you're already very familiar with HIPAA. Don't know how many in this audience today are in that space. So as you're closing that out, I want to be able to emphasize the point that using this data protection measure, because it's automatable, it can be used proactively in your development and DevSecOps environments to mitigate the weaknesses prior to release into the enterprise. I mean, you're really shifting everything left. You're able to get your developers, it's in their hands, they can look for that, they can mitigate it there. But if you didn't do that, if you've already released it into the enterprise, this can actually be used by audit organizations or IB&V organizations to determine privacy and data protection controls if they have indeed been implemented. So not surprising, and actually I am a bit surprised by the audience here, so that many are already looking into GDPR. Certainly if you have any customers or clients in Europe, then you are definitely affected by that. And even California is really on this next go round on balloting, looking to change the CCPA. The point is, privacy is not going away, and it's all going to be about data protection. So that's why we've done this close alignment of looking at your process controls, but you need to understand your enterprise assets to help do something, to be proactive about mitigating the risk for data leakage or data corruption. And then finally, last slide. What we're doing is a follow-on to this, and Bill could talk. You want to talk more to this, Bill, since you're on there, because I know you're going to be working this actively for us.
Yeah, for those of you who pay attention to the ISO 25000 series, we've shown you a couple of times the product quality model with the 8 quality characteristics. We're right now revising that. That's a big activity in the ISO 25000 work. And for instance, I've been pressing them for several years now to incorporate safety into the quality model. It's so critical for avionics and healthcare and anything that deals with life or property critical systems. And we're taking portability, and that's going to become flexibility, and portability will be a sub-characteristic. We're adding scalability. I mean, the issue is to create a area that focuses on modernization of systems, a quality characteristic. So one of the things that we're doing, and it's already sort of there in 25010 in the security area, is making sure that it's strong on data protection, and that the work Joe's doing really fleshes that out. And so when we have the CISQ metric approved through the OMG standardization process, that'll be available to guide you, and we'll try to help supplement the 25000 series standards with the data protection standard that CISQ is creating. So that's a lot of our work, is really help build that 25000 and continue to support it with software, source code level measures that support that overall standard.
I've got to add the other point that Jeff was kind of pounding the table on this. Preparation is everything. If you're simply preparing for an audit and only looking at your processes, if you actually have not scanned the devices, your assets that are in your enterprise, you have no knowledge of really understanding where the data leakage problems are. So preparation would include scanning your enterprise assets.
Yeah, certainly I've focused on the 2 sides of this across my career, or actually 3 sides of it. I led development of the original CMM, which was very much a process standard. now as executive director of CISQ, we're really focused on analyzing the product itself to make sure that it meets all the requirements of a strong cyber resilient product. And also when I built the people CMM, the people side is critical. You've got to train your people to be able to execute the process and to understand the implications of weaknesses in the product. So we actually had, in relation to this, we created a trustworthy systems manifesto with 5 points for what it takes, really what we should focus on in creating systems that we trust, that are resilient, that are secure, and what have you. Tracy, next slide.
Yeah, and Bill and Joe, we have a
Go
couple
ahead.
of questions that came in. So maybe
If they're
I
related to
can,
data protection, let's go ahead and take them now. That's fine.
Okay.
yeah, the first is can you link where we can find the crosswalk document that ties 800-171, 853, and ISO 27001? And Joe, I know that's a working document, but we could send that out to the participants.
So those slides that I gave are actually in a spreadsheet so that you can look at which of the process controls are relevant to this. What I haven't done yet is to take the individual CWEs and the individual process controls and do the many-to-one or the one-to-many mappings to each one of those. The bottom line is, if you have these weaknesses in your systems that are processing, transmitting, or storing data, you got an issue with your process controls. You can say how fine line do you want to get this, but you have an issue. That's what it really comes down to. You need to take a look at that.